Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're unlocking something that's, well, honestly a bit of a game changer in education, but often gets completely misunderstood. I'm talking about the Philippine Informal Reading Inventory, or the Phil-IRI 2018 for short. If you've ever found yourself wondering, how on earth do teachers figure out exactly what a kid needs to actually become a successful reader? Well, you are in the exact right place. We're going to see how this specific diagnostic tool takes just raw, plain data and turns it into targeted, life-changing action in the classroom. So at the very heart of the Philippine education system sits this incredibly powerful, visionary goal: every child a reader. It's a beautiful mission, right? But it kind of begs a pretty dramatic question. How do we actually know where a child is starting from before we can, effectively teach them? Think about it. You literally cannot give directions to a destination if you don't know where the journey is starting. And that is exactly the gap the Phil-IRI is built to bridge. To really get how this works, we're going to break the whole process down into 5 clear steps today. First, we'll look at the every child a reader philosophy. Then, step 2, the group screening test. Step 3, individual graded passages. Step 4, finding the reading level. And finally, step 5, intervention and the post-test. All right, let's jump into section 1, every child a reader, and the diagnostic philosophy behind it all. Now, it's absolutely crucial to wrap our heads around this right out of the gate. The Phil-IRI is not just some standardized test. There's no passing or failing here, and nobody's getting a grade for their report card. Instead, it's a diagnostic approach that is deeply, deeply rooted in inclusive education. There's this great quote straight from the manual. It says, "This diagnostic approach to describing how children read embraces inclusionary principles that emphasize the need for education that is learner-oriented." I absolutely love that. It takes us from being just a boring set of administrative rules into a genuinely noble philosophy. It's all about being completely responsive to what that specific learner actually needs in that exact moment. Moving on to section 2, the group screening test. Essentially, triage in the classroom. Picture a teacher looking out at a buzzing room full of, say, 40 students. They need a fast, efficient way to cast a really wide net and figure out who is on track and who might need a closer look. That's stage 1, the initial screening. This happens right at the beginning of the school year, usually June or July. It captures a quick baseline snapshot of the entire class. So 3rd to 6th graders take this in Filipino, and 4th to 6th graders take it in English. It's that essential first step to just get the lay of the land. And honestly, what makes this step so brilliant is just how efficient it is. The group screening test, or the GST, is a silent test that takes only 30 minutes, just half an hour. It's basically 20 multiple-choice questions based on leveled passages. And the best part? It happens entirely during regular class time. So it doesn't totally derail the school schedule, but it still gives the teacher this immediate, actionable data. Now, once those 20 items are graded, the teacher is looking for one very specific magic number: 14. This number is literally the pivotal cutoff score that decides every single student's next step in the process. The whole shebang hinges on whether a student scores above or below this exact line. And this brilliantly illustrates that fork in the road for the kids. See, if a student gets a raw score of 14 or higher out of 20, which is essentially 75% or better, they stay right in regular classroom instruction. No extra testing needed. They're good to go. But if they score below a 14, well, that acts as a flag. It tells the teacher, hey, this student might be struggling with at-level text. So they're going to need some further individualized assessment to pinpoint exactly where that disconnect is happening. Which brings us to section 3, individual graded passages, zooming in. So for the kids who scored below that 14, we shift gears. We zoom all the way in from looking at the whole class to focusing entirely on the individual. And this right here, this is truly the heart of the assessment. It's this incredibly dynamic, one-on-one setup where the teacher literally sits with the child, listens to them read out loud, and pays close attention to their specific mispronunciations, their reading speed, and their comprehension. The goal is to truly map out their unique reading profile. But where do they actually start reading? Obviously, we don't just hand them their current grade level textbook. That would be super discouraging. Instead, we use the math from their screening test to figure out a safe starting line. For example, if they scored between 8 and 13 points, the teacher drops the passage difficulty down by 2 grade levels. If they scored way down between 0 and 7, they drop it by 3 grade levels. The absolute key here is that we purposefully start easy. We want to build up their confidence right away and prevent any immediate frustration. Okay, so once we've found that perfect starting passage, there's a really specific sequence the teacher follows. Step 1 is oral reading comprehension. The teacher tracks miscues and asks questions while the student reads aloud. But pay attention to steps 2 and 3 here. If a student is really struggling to even decode the words, the teacher can actually read the text out loud to them to test their listening comprehension. This is such an incredible extra layer, right? It uncovers their actual ability to comprehend a story when that huge barrier of just sounding out words is completely removed. Let's move to Section 4, Finding the Reading Level, or, as I like to call it, the Goldilocks search. Now, what is the teacher actually looking for during all this one-on-one time? Well, they're having the student read these different passages to find the text that isn't too easy, but isn't too hard. It's that just right zone, which the manual calls the instructional level. This is the exact grade level where the child can read with just a little bit of teacher support. It's where they aren't totally bored, but they aren't completely overwhelmed either. Basically, it's the ultimate sweet spot where students actually learn new skills and make the most progress. And the coolest part, this isn't just based on a teacher's gut feeling. It is mathematically confirmed using this exact tier system. If a kid hits 97 to 100% accuracy on reading the words, that's their independent level. If they drop into the 90 to 96% range, boom, there's our target, the instructional level. But if they fall to 89% or below in word reading or 58% or below in comprehension, they've unfortunately hit their frustration level. Let's actually contrast those two extremes for a second, because identifying them is just as vital as finding that instructional sweet spot. The independent level, that builds massive confidence. It tells the teacher exactly what books to hand the kid for free reading just to keep them motivated and loving books. On the flip side, finding that frustration level is absolutely crucial, because it tells teachers exactly what materials the student is simply not ready for yet. It literally protects them from feeling defeated. All right, final section, Section 5, Intervention and Post-Test, Turning Data into Action. Because look, let's be totally honest here. Diagnostic data means absolutely nothing if it doesn't lead to real action, right? Measuring a gap doesn't magically close the gap. So here in Stage 3, the prescription is finally applied. Using the exact detailed reading profiles generated from those graded passages, the student gets specialized instruction. This might look like small group work, maybe some individualized remedial reading sessions, or even just adjusted classroom instruction that's tailored exactly to their instructional level. Let's anchor all these abstract concepts to a practical school year timeline, because this is definitely not a one-and-done event. First quarter, around June and July, we do our triage and the one-on-one pre-tests. Then, for the entire second and third quarters, the real heavy lifting happens. That's the specialized reading intervention. And finally, in the fourth quarter, usually around February or March, we do a formal check-in. And that check-in is Stage 4, the post-test. Using a parallel, completely fresh set of graded passages, the teacher sits down with the student all over again. The big goal here is to measure the efficacy of that intervention. Did the student's instructional level move up a grade? Did their comprehension jump up? It is this wonderful built-in moment to measure, reflect, and, most importantly, celebrate the student's growth. So what does this all mean? The Phil-IRI basically hands educators the master keys to unlock a child's current abilities. It takes what feels like an overwhelming challenge, a struggling reader, and turns it into a clear, structured, totally manageable roadmap. So, to all the educators and lifelong learners tuning in, we've measured their reading level, we know exactly where they're starting. Now, what world will you help them read? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.